There's something uncanny in the transition into night. Heidegger questions not so much that day and night have to go together, that as he cites from the early Greeks, that he who only says night doesn't know night. He who only says day doesn't know day. But he asked us, where is it that in the transition, where is that happening? Where is that? Where are we when we're transitioning from day to night? Can we think that in an uncanny way and ascend to this realm of the thinking? It strikes to me that in the Chinese thinking, the core, and we don't need to be iconoclastic, instead we can just stick with what is often said already, that yin and yang are one of the supreme thoughts of the Chinese world. And perhaps this thought as day and night, or I suppose the other way around, I think yin would be night and yang would be day. If this was the first way yin and yang were thought, perhaps they were thought all in a flash, thinking cold and warmth, thinking of darkness and light, thinking of female and male. All these thoughts, or some portion of them, might have been thought, who knows, 100,000 years ago, much longer, by Neanderthals, by some early. Of course, we know that language is only supposed to come in 70,000 years ago or so, but why couldn't this have been thought in some other way? Even somehow through a dance or ritual, or through the sparks coming from the fire that the Neanderthals were about, who knows? But in any case, I think that concept brings us into the East in a very solid way, in a major way. And this is really the core of Chinese thinking. Now, there's all kinds of objections along the way. For instance, thinking of the Taoism example, which does later on use yin and yang in its own way, one can object, the Taoism was never, not that many people really subscribe to Taoism. But I think that kind of argument misses the point, because it's not a question of how many people were part of the Taoist club or something. It's a question of how much of the thought permeated the basic stratum of the culture, or the civilization, or of that world, however one, in Heideggerian terms, we should say of that world, of that Dasein. I mean, for instance, if one were to ask how many people are actually scientists in the European countries, very few. But does that mean science is not the greatest authority in the West right now? No. In fact, even many people that are actively very antagonistic to scientism, to say the Brights movement or something like that, a very small movement, nonetheless respond to science and recognize it as the what is the leading authority in our time. It doesn't matter that one is the member of the Brights or whatever. But another way, but nonetheless, the thought of yin and yang is not just a Taoist thought. It goes back much further, and it's also in the other thinkings in China, and it's in the Confucianism. I think one way Confucianism is misunderstood in the West can be that the misunderstanding can be somewhat remedied by pointing out that in Confucianism, unlike probably every other country on the earth, the the man at the top, the emperor, is not the highest value. Um, if the emperor is to tell you to kill your father, then what you're meant to do, according to Confucianism, is kill the emperor. The families were thought in a somewhat the respect and honor of the family was thought to create a kind of merit-based ordered society. That certain families will be elevated, and within those families, which will be the emperor. That's the other side of it, I guess, that the emperor has an obligation to those families, and the father of each family has an obligation to the children. And so it's not just the way one might think that it's a question of power or one-way relationship. It's very much thought in terms of this two-way, reciprocal, not even reciprocal, but two-way in the sense of yin and yang, really. It's all thought in terms of pairs, um, dyads, however one wants to put it. But it's really thought not in terms of the Western sense of relations, but in this sense that the yin and yang interpermeate one another. Um, that's probably the core thought of China, I would say. And it somehow perhaps even relates to their thinking about the nature concept, which is considerably different in the West, although that would get complicated to get into. Isaiah Berlin says in the 18th century alone, there were 200, which was a century when there was a mania for um, lexigraphs and encyclopedias and so on, as is well known. But he said there were 200 definitions cooked up for nature in the 18th century alone. That's a difficult concept. I mentioned in passing that it's often said by non-philosophical people, why is the dictionary not sufficient? One can see that if the lexicographer were possessed of true knowledge, that would be fine. Then we just say, oh, we want to know what nature is, we want to know what justice is, let's just look it up. But it's not like that. So we have to make investigations ourselves. We can look at what the dictionary writers say and so forth. That's often helpful for initial orientation, but we have to make the investigations ourselves because these things are not known. They're only known in the sense of being conventions that have a certain power um, within certain localities or institutions. Um, so, how does Heidegger's thinking, where he says, we do not say, how is it, est sein, sein ist. We do not say sein ist, being is. We do not say Zeit ist, time is, but rather we say es gibt sein, and we say es gibt Zeit. And this being because Heidegger says Zeit und Sein, time and being, are not Saka, are not subject matter, are not something we can name like everything else. And he seems to try to show us that in this reflection on what is this, where are we, where is it, what give, as Gibsite could mean straightforwardly, it gives time, but it really means there is time, like it is there, something we can point to in a way. What is this reflection showing us about Heidegger's thought of being, thought of time? That the moment when the night is gathered, when the day has slipped into this gathering of the night, where was that happening? Where was that happening? Um, if it's these kind of things require somehow some felicity, I think, of and resolution to enter into the reflection to find whether we can see something uncanny in it, whether we can see something in it at all. Um, does it require actually mostly, should we observe phenomenologically that instance of the gathering of night or of the transition, which is to say, standing there and watching it? Or can it be done also through reflection, imagining it or remembering it or dreaming it? Um, Heidegger does say that beings in dreams and imagination are just the same as beings in what we usually call real life. They're all beings. They're the same in that they're beings. He recognizes a distinction between the outer things and the inner things, but they're all beings. What the recognition of that distinction means for us is not clear. We're still trying to think that, but it's clear that we can identify it. It's clear, at least in that sense, that we can identify external reality. We can identify dreams and imagination. We could be fooled, of course, since we're also moving in this Cartesian doubt. But okay, so that's it for that reflection for the moment. I don't think there's, still want to say more about this issue of nature. Also, we should try to think how the categories work in Heidegger. How well, especially, I'll point people on what I've been talking about in this video to the Floor lecture book, where he talks about the night and day and some various reflections on those lines. Which maybe if you can look up online, you can just reference it, night and day, or just night or something like that, and see what he's saying about that. The other thing would be his book on metaphysics, Theta, where he's going for a very long time reflecting on the dunamis and energia, this and on the categories, on how he's trying to carve out certain of the so-called innate categories from the other categories and think them into being, which is something I think one has to come to and thinking through Heidegger.